Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. I know you don't want to listen to a long, drawn-out commercial at the beginning of this. You want to get on with the podcast. So I'm just going to tell you this. Go get my best-selling book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. You'll learn how attackers look at you. You'll learn what your vulnerabilities are and how you can develop plans of action when you can't change things and defensive procedures when you can. It's not just a technical book. It's also got stories in there as well. And go check out for the children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. It's a book full of pictures that have lessons built into them, and the parent goes to teamlittlebigs.com and you download the lesson plans, give the child the book, and you sit there and you go through the lessons with them, and you'd be surprised how well children from 2 to 8 learn, and learning disabled children as well. The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. Go get them wherever books are sold, and let's start the show.
The truth has arrived.
My name is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is The Experts. And welcome back to the show. We got a lot to talk about, and I just went into my reverend type of, welcome back to the show. I'm glad that you're here. That'll probably be the last time I do that on the show, but listen, I love to crack myself up. So anyway, let's get started here because, you know, it's interesting. I come on this show. I say this all the time, I think. I come on this show, and I go and look at the news before I start the show. And it, you know, it's kind of usually it's the same news just over and over and over again. But what's interesting about what's occurring in the news now, I kind of talked about this the other day, is that the news has not really been as pressurized as it was over the past 4 years. And by and large, a lot of that really caused a great deal of anger in this nation. And was just filled with lies. And I mean, I've done several shows on all this stuff, but what's interesting now is that the news has become so predictable. I mean, it is, before it was predictable because all they did was talk about Trump, but it has really become predictable. But when we look at some of the stuff that's coming out now, I talked about, maybe I didn't talk about it. It was yesterday. I was looking at the Drudge Report, and it was saying that that the virus has become greatly less politicized. Well, that's just amazing. That's amazing because it wasn't Trump that was making it politicized. It was the media and it was the left, right? But then the left mainstream media will report that it's less politicized. And then you look on Drudge today. I should have had this pulled up already, but let me pull it up real quick. And I love this. It says, where is it here? Here it is. Update. COVID cases, hospitalizations continue to fall. Health officials baffled. Now, the thing about this that cracks me up, okay, is that this was predictable. We knew this was going to happen, right? As soon as the Democrats took over, the lie of COVID was going to start to not crumble, but was going to start to be pulled back quite a bit. Listen, I said this 1,000 times. I always like to give this caveat. I had COVID. I know that it can be deadly. People close to me have died from it. I've seen the amount of elderly that have died from COVID, and I've seen the way it was used by people like the Democrat governors in these elderly homes or nursing homes. There's nothing nursing about them, I'll tell you that right now. But they put COVID positive patients in there and killed tens of thousands of people. And I could just see, as well as you could most likely, that it was being politicized, right? There's no doubt about that. They used it to go against Trump all the time. You saw it all over the TV, the death tolls, all these things were all over you barely could see who was hosting a TV show or who the guest was on any mainstream media, because they would have all the stuff about COVID all over it. As soon as Trump was out of office, that stuff came down. It's back up now, but not as extreme as it was, and not all the time. And the overall politicization of COVID has started to calm down, right? That's because that it was politicized by the left, not by the right. And the fact that health officials are baffled is because one of two things: either they are part of the lie, and so now they're just going to say, oh my gosh, I don't know why this is like this, or they're possessed by Satan, which is probably more likely the case. Well, actually, they're both true. They're possessed and they're liars. And that's, sounds funny, but it's half true, because I do believe a lot of these people are demonically influenced, and the fact that they would go out of their way to politicize and to take part in it. Fauci is one of the biggest scam artists I think we've ever seen in the history of politics. He is everything that it typifies when you watch these documentaries about, when the kings and queens were off, when they reigned supreme around the world, and you always have that one, advisor that's very sneaky and cunning and stays very close to the hip. You saw it in Game of Thrones. If you watch that, Cersei, her advisors that were the health guys, or whatever you would call them, they weren't like Merlin, but they were, kind of like the doctors of that day and age. These people have always existed. Yes, I know Game of Thrones was not real, but still, I could just picture this back in the day, of these saying whatever would, make them look powerful and please whoever was in charge. That's Dr. Fauci. Just a weirdo. Don't wear any mask. You don't need gloves. You need gloves and a mask. You don't just need a glove and a mask. You need 2 masks and wash your hands. The guy he's all over the place. He stands with Trump. He didn't stand with Trump. It was hard work for Trump. It wasn't hard work for Trump. I mean, the guy's all over the place, and nothing he said, or the WHO or the CDC or any of these Democrat governors and politicians, has made a bit of difference. It's just destroyed the country. Absolutely, completely, terribly mismanaged. Terribly. So when I'm looking at these headlines, what I'm seeing, and I picked out just a few. Is that they're very predictable, but they're still kind of unusual in the way that you wouldn't think that you would have seen this stuff back in the day, that these types of lies would be this blatant. Now, I want to get into this a little bit more, but before actually, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and get into this, and I'm going to save this other thing for the end, because over the past couple of days, I've talked to a tremendous amount of people that are having very difficult times, and so I just want to cover that a little bit, but I'll save that to the end. First and foremost, this whole lie, okay, about white supremacy and the rise of all these domestic white terrorist attacks, and everything is white. We saw this all coming over the past year, especially when after George Floyd was murdered by a cop, and all the activists and the divisive people that are in politics jumped on board and used that as a way to basically further their schemes of getting people divided in this nation so they can control them. That's what that was all about. And the lie of white supremacy and the rise of this white domestic terrorist, you could see it taking hold. It's the same lie as they say about police officers and how, destructive and murderous police officers are. In fact, I was on Newsmax today. I'm going to play this just a few seconds of this. This was the last thing that, yes, it was Bob Sellers. I know everybody's down on Bob Sellers because he acted like a fool, quite frankly. I would tell that to him, to his face. I've met Bob Sellers, actually extremely, extremely nice guy, and has a lot of experience beyond the news. To be honest, he's one of the few people that I've met in news that has experience far beyond just sitting in front of a camera. The guy has got a lot of experience in life. I don't know what his beef was with Mike Lindell, and so I know a lot of people, because they cherish Mike Lindell, they are totally offended and put off, and now they're saying that Newsmax is this terrible, and don't watch Newsmax. And quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, I've been around Newsmax for about 7 years now, hosted shows on Newsmax, been a guest on there forever, and I think Newsmax does it just as good, if not better, than anybody else when it comes conservative, not just conservative, but realistic, level-headed news. And I don't know what happened with Bob Sellers and Mike Lindell. It looked like he was very aggravated about it for some reason, and I've gone back and forth with Bob a few times on Newsmax, but he's a good guy. I will say this one caveat about Mike Lindell, okay? He's gone off the freaking Q deep end, right? He's a QAnon conspiracy nut. I was in D.C., not in January 6th. I was not there then, but the rally that they had before that, I went there because the one before that, I could see that it was useless. I knew those rallies in D.C. were useless, but I wanted to go. I wanted to experience it, and I wanted to tell people about the Free Territory Alliance that I had developed. And when I saw Mike Lindell there, and I've met him before at Newsmax, and I thought he was a great guy, a great American, but when I saw him in Washington, D.C., walking around amongst some of the biggest QAnon weirdos and conspiracy theorists on the same stage as Alex Jones, and he didn't seem like the same guy to me. And then I've watched him on the news over the past couple of months, and really over the past month, and it's gotten more and more odd watching him. I'm not saying he's wrong about the Dominion voting machines. In fact, he's probably kind of right about a lot of that stuff, but I don't know, there's something about, he got involved and got in with this QAnon stuff with General Flynn and that whole group of nonsense, and I think he's just gone down this road where it's too little too late. First of all, it's too little too late. Everybody wants to stop the Dominion stuff and the voting machines and what happened with the stealing of this election. You should have been concerned with that 4 years ago after the 2017 election. This should have been literally, it should have been the first thing that the president jumped on board about, not the wall. The wall should have happened. There's other things that should have happened, but fixing the voting is something that should have taken priority. It never mattered to anybody until November 3rd. It didn't matter to anybody on the right until November 3rd. And there were many of us that saw that it was an issue, and it should have been paper ballots. There should have been hand counting, should have been voter ID, and no mail-in ballots. That should just not have happened. If anything, these people should have been driving up in their cars. So anyway, about Mike Lindell, I'm going to play this interview in just a second with Bob Sellers that happened today, and I'm actually sick and tired already of people coming on when I post these interviews and they say, I'm not watching Newsmax anymore. Bob Sellers should be fired, and this is disgusting. And people saying stuff, and it looks like they're talking about me, right? And listen, if you have a problem with Newsmax, go to Newsmax site and criticize them there. If I post a video where I'm trying to show you some analysis of something, man up and get past who you don't like on there so you can hear, or either that or don't listen to it. I don't care, whatever you want to do. But I'm just going to delete your comments. If you come on there and say stupid stuff on my page, I'm just going to delete it. Because I'm trying to get people to listen to what I'm trying to say, which is the truth, not have a bitch fest because they don't like what somebody did to Mike Lindell. Listen, I sleep on Mike's pillow every night, right? But I don't appreciate the road that he's gone down of the QAnon conspiracy stuff, and I don't know. I don't like it. I don't appreciate it, and I think he's above that. Anyway, I want to get to this part of the interview where I was talking about what keeps me awake at night, the fear I have, and it kind of goes along with the lies that I was talking about when I started on this rant about these lies about law enforcement, about the white supremacy, and all these different things. It's all political jargon. And so here's when I was on Newsmax talking about what keeps me awake at night, although I don't really sleep at night. So I guess what keeps me awake in the mornings when I sleep for the couple hours that I do.
Let me ask you, with your background, you have very broad background. What worries you? What threats are out there that people don't think about that you see because of your knowledge of intelligence and fight? I'll put it like this: fighting the bad guys. What worries you?
Well, a system where they're trying to get rid of those who police, first and foremost, that's very, very dangerous because, as we've seen, you know, a good example, the Lord of the Flies, the book, you can see what happens when there's a community that doesn't have structure, when it doesn't have any type of authority in it. And we have laws for a reason in this nation. And my biggest fear is not ISIS or Al Qaeda. I'll agree with her on that. That's not our biggest national security threat. Our biggest national security threat that keeps me awake at night, and I know a lot of people say that, but literally keeps me awake at night, is politics. Politics that will actually compromise the safety of people for an election or for a special interest. And that's a very dangerous thing. And these young people who fall right in line with that and who discount police and authority and respect, it's very, very dangerous because those people grow up to be adults who have no respect and don't understand law enforcement.
Right.
So that's kind of where I'm kind of going with this is I look at these headlines and I look at the politicization, just like we were talking about with the COVID virus. When I look at these headlines and the lies that are there, they're getting so predictable, but dangerous at the same time. And when this one headline that came off of the Associated Press, which, you know, there was a day and age when you would see AP or you would see Reuters, and you would think, okay, this is big news if it's coming from there. But it's all the same lies. I mean, it's almost like they're born out of AP and Reuters now. It's really bad. It's trash news in the biggest news gathering organizations in the world. And this one, on AP, it says that the headline is "Officials: No Super Bowl Threat Amid Rise of White Supremacy." I mean, this makes absolutely no sense. And when I look, let's take that headline, okay, and then let's flip on over to the reality for a second. Olympia, Washington, mayor calls forcible occupation of hotel domestic terrorism. All right. It wasn't being occupied by white supremacists. It's being occupied by leftists who are demanding certain things for homeless and for people who are poor. Right. That's the reality. If there was ever going to be an attack on the Super Bowl, it's going to be most likely done by either Islamic terrorists or leftists, to be honest with you, anarchists, Antifa. Those types of people that you could see the Super Bowl being disrupted by Black Lives Matter. You're not going to see the Super Bowl being disrupted by white supremacists. Listen, the people in this nation that are conservatives, right, and that are constitutionalists, they aren't white. They're patriots. Okay. There's people with dark skin. There's people with white skin. There's Asians. There's foreigners that have come over here and became a citizen the natural way, the legal way. That is who is concerned about this nation and where it's going. Okay. What the media is trying to do is say that those people are actually white supremacists and that they're the ones who stormed the Capitol building on January 6th. The reality is, what happened in January 6th, and I've said this several times, is that a lot of people who cared about the president and who are very patriotically minded and who love this country and the Constitution, but they're like weekend warriors, like they're rally warriors. They love to go to rallies, and they believe that, at least at that point, that rallying was the way to make change when it absolutely does nothing. You know, the left figured that out a long time ago. They don't rally, they protest, and they break stuff. And then they end up getting attention, or they block streets or do whatever. They shut things down. They break the system, and then the system reacts to it. Well, the system is really a leftist system, or it's a bunch of appeasers like you have in the Republican establishment. Either way, what you get is the left gets their way because they actually do use terrorism, force, violence, and fear. Or let's say it better. Let's say fear, intimidation, and violence for a political aim. That's what the left uses. That's the definition of terrorism. So what we see on the right with these people that are constitutionally minded, the people who showed up on January 6th, is you saw a lot of people who showed up there to support the president, and they're very angry at government because of what's happening to our way of life in this country. And then you had a bunch of QAnon weirdos, and you mixed in Antifa with that, and that's who stormed the building with no plan to do anything. So when I read these headlines, it infuriates me because there is going to be white supremacy. I mean, first of all, there's no rise in white supremacy terrorism. It's not happening. It's a complete fabricated lie. Just like police officers aren't getting up every day and going to work to murder people, right? That's a fabricated lie. As I said today on Newsmax, if you take a cop that spent their entire career in Beverly Hills, and you took a cop that spent their entire career in Compton, those are two different communities that they police. And the aggressiveness is not going to be the same, because most likely when you give somebody a parking ticket in Beverly Hills, you're not going to get shot and killed. But yet you could sit and eat donuts in Compton and get shot and killed just for being a cop. The drug use, there's drug use that goes on in Beverly Hills, but it's behind the scenes, and wealthy people can afford to do that stuff in the confines of their own place, right? Well, in Compton, there's a turf war going on every day of the year, and it's a violent war. Chicago's the same way. The 75th precinct in New York's the same way. Anywhere there's an inner city, it's the same thing. Drug violence is out of control. And so police tactics are going to be different, just like the community is different. People in Beverly Hills are more respectful of law enforcement, right? Because they got stuff to lose. You got people in the inner city, they don't have any hope. They've been told that there's no chance of them having any kind of life whatsoever, and they've been told that the cops are there to kill you, right? So their outlook of police and their behavior towards police is terrible. So this lie that the left has made up, that law enforcement is out to get black people, is an absolute lie. It's a complete fabricated lie. And when you look at this white supremacy thing, it's being made up by the same exact leftist people. So when I read this, it's so ridiculously stupid. They actually say there is no specific threat to an attack connected to the Super Bowl and related events, despite concerns about the rise of white supremacist extremists, law enforcement officials said Wednesday. I'd like to know what law enforcement official is saying that. I can guarantee you, if you go look at, they're either a careerist or they're a leftist. It goes on to say, the FBI has made several arrests in the Tampa area of people who allegedly took part in the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol building. But Michael McPherson, chief of the Tampa FBI office, said no links have been found in indicating something similar might occur surrounding Sunday's game. Look, if there's people that are going to do that, right, it's either going to be Antifa, which some of them were there on January 6th, or it could be some group of weirdos who think that, because it could happen. It could happen that these extremists like Q people are going to start trying to get attention. But you got to understand, QAnon, and I hope some of you are listening to this, it's a cult, right? It's a cult of believe whatever you're told, because you, the Q people, they're the ones. See, at first it may have been one person or a couple of people, but now the reality is QAnon is a cyclical phenomenon. People make up information, or they think they found something. I'm onto the secret. Then they report that, and then they consume it themselves. So it's this cycle of, maybe this day it's Linda, and down there the next day it's going to be Robert. And Linda will put something up one day or spread some rumor. Robert thinks it's amazing. And the next day, Robert's making his analysis based on nothing but hearsay, and he puts it up, and then Linda thinks that's amazing. That's the way QAnon works. The same people that are making crap up are the same people who are consuming it, and they all spread it. It's still going on now. So I don't know, but I have heard of nothing, and trust me, my ears to the ground. I have connections. I've heard of nothing from anyone that this is actually a real threat. Anybody that knows what they're talking about. So this is an insult to, it's just another way that they're trying to drive down patriotic beliefs in the Constitution and an understanding of how important that is in this nation. They're trying to drive that down, and they're trying to vilify anybody who stands up for the way of life in this nation and empowerment of the people. They don't want that. They want victimization, like AOC, right? AOC right now is getting hammered in social media because she gave, and I talked about this the other day in a podcast, she is a victim. She is still dragging out January 6th to the extreme. She's milking it for everything she can, saying that she was a victim, that she almost got killed, that Ted Cruz tried to get her murdered. She's saying that she was sexually assaulted when she was younger, and this was just like it. Turns out she wasn't even anywhere close to the Capitol building. She was in her office, which is down the road and across the street. So she is a liar, and we all know that. And she's a bullshit artist. And it's the same exact thing as all the rest of this stuff. What she has to say is fake, and she has no problem spitting it out. But just like Jesse Smollett, or, man, I already forgot what's his name that was driving for NASCAR, Bubba Wallace, these people have no shame, and they will lie. Look, again, lying doesn't know, it's not a color thing. There's been plenty of people out there, Joe Biden, for instance, who's been lying his entire career. One of the reasons why the first time he ran for president, he didn't win is because he plagiarized and lied about where he went to college. The guy's a liar, and he's raised a family of liars. So it's not a color thing, but these people will sit right in front of you. All of them will sit right in front of you, and they will lie straight to the media, straight to your face, and say things that are just absolutely ridiculous. AOC is right now in the top running for the queen of all liars, right, at this point. She's doing it on a daily basis. So, listen, the other thing I wanted to go back to on that is that other story I was telling you about, the Olympia mayor calling forcible occupation of hotel domestic terrorism. Now, she went on to say that the group's demands made no sense, and this was a city council member actually said that this wasn't activism, this is nihilism. But this is what's interesting about this group, okay? They see, what is their name? It's they went into the Olympia Red Lion Hotel about 11 a.m. On Sunday, armed with items such as hatchets, batons, and knives, and had gas mask, helmets, and goggles. Who does that remind me of in that area? Antifa. That's who that reminds me of. It doesn't remind me of white supremacists or patriots or any of these other people that are either being vilified or just the threat doesn't really exist, like the white supremacists. That threat is just basically not there. It's really Antifa that's the threat. And by and large, terrorism is going to raise its head. You mark my word on this. I already said this publicly. Islamic terrorism is going to come back. It always comes back when the Democrats are in charge, mysteriously. So everything that they're describing in this story about these people is really, this could be, and I think is actually terrorism, right? This is a good example of what terrorism actually is on a local level, okay? When I mean on a local level, it's not international terrorism. It's not any specific group, although I think most of these people probably could be equated to Antifa, the same type of people that do that. But in this case, their motivation may be different. But remember, you don't have to be a terrorist group in order to use terrorism. The use of fear, intimidation, and violence for a political aim, that is terrorism. They like to say that terrorists, and they just like they say a bank robber, and in order to be a bank robber, you have to be actually committing bank robbery, right? It's the same thing with to be called a terrorist, which they love to use that name to describe people who rally because they're conservative. They call them terrorists, or because they're white, they call them a white supremacist. When in fact they aren't using terrorist tactics, they're not using fear, intimidation, violence. Look, here's a big difference, and I'm gonna get back to the story. If I walk up to you, right, because you're invading my home, or like let's say you're doing something on my yard, right, and I go up to you and I say, get out of my yard, or get off my car, and I use, I push you and I shove you and I tell you to get out of there, whatever. Or I have a dog with me that's trained, and I have the dog bark to scare you to get you away. All right. I'm using fear. I'm using intimidation. And if I shove you, I'm using violence to get you out of my yard, but that's not terrorism. Now, if let's say you're a city council member and I know where you live, and I'm constantly going to where you live with a group of people or even by myself, and I'm constantly, waiting for you to get there, and when you get out of your car, I shove you, or I have that same dog, and I'm letting that dog intimidate you, maybe even bite you, or I break your windows out with a hammer, and I say I'm going to come back tomorrow with more people if you don't do what I want you to do because I believe this certain way and you're a city council member. That is borderline terrorism when I continuously do that over and over and over. Or if I burn your house down and I say that, and I leave a message out there saying that I will be back if you don't change this law. That's a form of terrorism, right? You see the difference there? Well, the media likes to equate those things and try to make them sound as though they're the same. If you are with a group and you stand up against the legislative branch of this government or anything else, and you are conservative, they consider you a terrorist for trying to hold the government accountable or trying to affect a reset of government. But yet they will go out and destroy cities, burn cities down, tell politicians that they should be killed, put that out on social media, stir up riots and destruction, pinpointed for the sheer change of government, a political aim, using all that force, intimidation, and violence, working together to censor and actually oppress people. That is terrorism. That is what the left is guilty of. But they're trying to use the narrative to make it sound like if you stand up against the government, you are a terrorist. And that's not true. Now, when we look, quite frankly, when we look at what was happening in Olympia, Washington, where these people went in and they're trying to get what they want, it is a form of terrorism in the way that they're doing it, showing up with knives and machetes and pipes and bats and carrying out targeted threats so that they can get what they want, so that things will change. That is a form of terrorism. And I'm surprised that somebody actually called it domestic terrorism. Although the FBI and the way that they categorize things doesn't really, it may not fit the legal standard of domestic terrorism. The only time the media uses that, and it won't be the FBI, it'll be quite often maybe the DOJ, and most likely the media will call something a domestic terrorist if they if they believe that it goes in the face of what they stand for. That's when they use that. That's basically all I wanted to say about that. What's one headline I will say is that there was a headline on Drudge. It said on Yahoo Finance that says gas is becoming worthless. Now, I didn't read the story, but man, I really hope it does become worthless, because that'd be great. That would be great for, as much as I travel, that would be very helpful if gas became worthless. Wow, could do a lot more traveling. Now, the last thing I want to go over is, over the past couple of days, I've had a tremendous amount of people that I know write me or make comments on social media that they're in a real funk about what's happening in this nation right now. And not just in the nation, but in their personal lives. People are very concerned, and a lot of people are having different types of issues when it comes to their motivation, when it comes to living in a world that's so divided and so miserable, and they're losing their way. People are just losing their way. And I kept reflecting on this, and I wrote a couple tweets last night after talking to some people, and I really want people to think about this. Your life will be over before you know it. And I've said this before, you're not going to get a second chance, right? Your life, once it's over here, is done. And one of the people that I was talking to yesterday, they're 40. And realistically, if they live the normal age of a human being in this day and age, they'll reach 75 to 85 years old. That's if they're lucky. That means their life is more than halfway over if they live to 75. Now think about that. Think about all the things that you've achieved and accomplished in your life. And now think about the things that you want to accomplish now, or that you want to continue to do, the things that you want to see and do. I mean, the world's not going to stay locked down forever. Things are going to change. They may get worse in this nation, actually, quite frankly, to be honest with you. But the reality is, and I can't say this enough, you're here on this earth to have a life of meaning and to prove that you can be trained, trusted, and that you won't quit. And to find and know God. That should be your main objective. Listen, let God worry about the world, right? You live your life the way God intended it. And you let him determine your part in the world. Remember, although we say, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. When Satan took Jesus up on the mountain and he said, cast yourself off the mountain and God's angels will lift you up. And Jesus said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. In other words, don't put yourself in a position that's precarious and thinking that it's okay, God is going to watch over me, when you know it's dangerous, right? But this isn't that case. A lot of the reasons why we're in the situation we're in this nation is because we've been lazy. We've been comfortable. Just like I talked about voting over the past 4 years. Nobody did anything about that. What happened on January 3rd was not something that was spontaneous. It was planned. The way these electronic voting machines were used, even if the virus just appeared in the beginning of 2020, the way that the Democrats immediately jumped on the bandwagon about mail-in voting there should have been an executive order or something. People should have been in the streets. Conservatives should have stopped everything they were doing and went out in the streets and shut every city in the United States down until they did paper ballots. It would have worked. I guarantee it. But nobody did anything. And so we're in the position that we're in, not because, it may be God's will, but I think the reality is it was our will. And our will is that we're comfortable and people didn't want to get up and stand against the government. And so things played out the way that they did. And now people are in a funk. And a lot of relationships, because of 2020, relationships have been injured. People's health has been injured. Livelihoods, businesses have been injured. And this is where I do believe God's will is here, is that it doesn't matter how comfortable you are or how uncomfortable you are. In fact, uncomfort is the only cure for the cancer of comfort. If you're a bit uncomfortable right now, that's okay. It means you're alive. If you are so comfortable that you're oblivious to what's going on, you're in the same position that we were 4 years ago. And eventually that will lead to heartache and pain. It always does. When you are uncomfortable, you are more likely to make wise choices. When you are comfortable, there's a bigger chance that you're going to do something that's going to get you hurt. Or, well, I mean, listen, you're so comfortable you never get off the couch, you're going to eventually, your body's going to die. Your body has to move. It's the same thing with life. If you don't live life, your life will end. And when it ends, you're not going to get a second chance. It's going to be done. And it's going to be failed and over. If you live life and you don't let life get in the way of living, you will have an extraordinarily meaningful life. And that's what you should be striving for. I wonder how many people out there that are so upset about the nation and so upset about Trump, and they're so upset about the way things are going and the way the election went. I wonder how many of those people have stopped, gotten in touch with a friend that they had a falling out with, or took their kids out and said, I love you. You know, I wonder how many people looked in the mirror and said, I'm proud that, to yourself, I'm proud that you've made it this far. You were born into this world with little to no guidance, and you've made it this far. I'm proud of you. How many of you have done that? How many of you have done something this past year that you always wanted to do? Write a book, read a book, start walking, start working out, whatever. Learn how to brew beer. I don't know. How many of you done that? But yet we're so caught up in the way that this world has turned out that we're just completely lost. And the fact is, the reason this nation and the world is the way it is because we were too damn comfortable. And that's the truth. Now, as I look through the news and I see all these predictable headlines that COVID is mysteriously on the decline and that hospitalizations and infections are magically declining, as I look at these fake headlines about the rise of white supremacy and domestic terrorists by patriots, all lies. Reality is Antifa and the left are the biggest domestic terrorists that we have in this nation, and politics, as usual, is the biggest national security threat. But you know what has to happen is that everybody has to stop. I don't care if you're happy or unhappy, and you have to start looking at life and start living again. Living again. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and I'm out of here.